Welcome to the Amplified CEO with VC and serial entrepreneur Richard Stroupe. With today's guest, General Robert S. Cooley, Jr. He's a retired U.S. Army Brigadier General, the CEO and co-founder of Nuream, and the owner of two of Wilmington's favorites, Apple Annie's Bake Shop and the Wine Sampler.
Cooley, thank you for coming by today. Warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, general is one of the terms I've been used, and there's plenty of other ones, but please call me Rob for sure.
Well, it's a title that you've earned. So I know plenty of generals, and I always lead out generals. So
thank you. It's too kind. Really appreciate it.
Well earned. And I'd love to learn more about your military background. And I know that you're active in this market in Wilmington, and you've got your own startup, and seems like you're multi-entrepreneur doing different things with the bakery and the wine shop. You know, it's just so much we could talk about here. But so why don't we just kick it out and tell me what in the world are you doing right now? Like what's keeping you busy these days? Anything?
So it's fun. There are no 2 days alike, which is I think is the start of the entrepreneur kind of journey.
Right.
But Nuream, our neurodata science company, is really exciting right now. We are continuing to raise money. We're looking at some really extreme partnerships, which is exciting. We're getting some outside validation with non-dilutive government grants, partnering with some really amazing companies and organizations. We're really taking that to the next level, which is exciting. You know, one of the key things about our success at Nuream is that the ecosystem here, the startup ecosystem or the entrepreneurial kind of environment in Wilmington is really unique. I was a corporate venture capital guy at Philips Medical Systems for about a decade out of the Boston area, traveling all over the world, buying, selling technologies and companies. And I can tell you the Boston environment is not as conducive to collaboration and win-win on everybody's side. This spot down here in Wilmington is. And so we've had some great advocates, the Jim Roberts of the world, the Joe Colopes and Greg Beat, and just the entrepreneurs here. We really kind of grip hands together and hold each other accountable, but are really there for each other. So that's the day. The day is really kind of Nuream and how we continue to grow. We're raising money, which is exciting in this very dynamic capital market. There's lots of uncertainty in just about everywhere, from the federal level down to the local level. Investors are kind of watching that with a very keen eye, and they should. And then, it's not bad being a small town entrepreneur in small town Main Street. Apple Annie's Bake Shop has been around for about 40 years, and we're a fabric of the community and really continue to give back. And then the wine sampler is also just a big part of the community. And it's fun to combine all those together. People say, is that too much on your plate? And I say, absolutely not, because I learn from each of the businesses, and certainly from the military as well. I will translate things that I've done for the last 30, 40 years in the military into the business side and back and forth. And then from one business to the other, because it's very interesting to watch, a retail business on small town America look at, a neurodata science company. How do you bring a product to market? And how do you talk about technology advancements? How do you stay above and beyond kind of the market need? How do you anticipate where the next market trend is going? And it's really interesting, kind of fun, but no 2 days alike. Busy from start to finish for sure.
Well, I know you spent 37 years in the military.
I did.
And, you're allowed to slow down a little bit and kind of retire one time.
I tried that. It didn't work very well for about 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like you're just ramping up, being way more busier now than you have in the past. But
it's fun. It is really fun. And being in the military for more than 37 years is just an honor. I mean, to be able to do the things we've done around the world and give back to our community is nothing but amazing. And I thank everybody out there who's listening, who has served, or anybody in their family served, because it is a tough racket these days. But we do what we do for our community, our families, and our country. So it's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I've got two getting ready to go in.
That's right. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, we'll see.
Need the best and brightest out there. Absolutely.
Geopolitical tensions, kind of like, whoa, what's going to happen?
Yeah, there's always been geopolitical tension, but things like the military have been around for a couple hundred years. Yes. We're meant to be that kind of calming influence, and we have senior leaders that are great, and they'll do a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I'd love to get some insights on the military, but I want to go back and touch base because you opened the idea of the ecosystem here in Wilmington.
Sure.
I know that you're very active with Jim Roberts, who we've also had on the podcast, and you're good friends with David Rissner and with Opiate, and of course we've had him here, and I know that you're doing a business venture with Topsail Steamer, so we've had Danielle on the podcast. So it just seems like it's a tight community that we have. Well, first and foremost, how did you break into that system and that network?
So it's really a network of networks. So when I came down here with, my dad's company that he started with my college fund in high school that made me or asked me to go to kind of West Point, we moved down here afterwards. So as an entrepreneur, in the late 90s, the ecosystem didn't exist, but I knew there needed to be some type of support structure internally. Then I went off to Chapel Hill, finished my MBA, went to Deloitte Consulting, then was hired by one of my clients, which was Philips Medical Systems, then ran their corporate venture model for about a decade. So now I've been a startup, I've been kind of a corporate VC, came back to Wilmington because I was deploying with the Army a couple of times. And when I got back to Wilmington, there was not an ecosystem. There's a couple big companies, but more the old school kind of Cornings and GEs, but there wasn't really, and there was small town entrepreneurship, but not a tech entrepreneurship opportunity. This was well before the Live Oak Banks and Encinos were here.
Okay.
And then when I came back after a couple of deployments, the second time, Jim Roberts and I had bumped into each other in a couple of environments. And I said, Jim, I'm a former or recovering corporate VC guy. How do I get involved in this? He said, well, come to some of my events. Okay. And that started to kind of, listen to the individuals that have been doing it. Because I'd been out of the corporate VC world for about a decade. So things have changed, right? Monetary vehicles have changed, cost of capital changed, the way we looked at technology has changed. So things had changed quite a bit, which was great, and I needed to get back inside of it. And Jim gave me the opportunity to just kind of put my toe in the water. And that turned into a couple investments. So I've made some investments in startup companies here through Jim's kind of angel network. That allowed me to see the kind of mechanical side of the entrepreneurship. And then when we started our new company, it was just a natural progression to say, hey, Jim, could you help me do this, meet these folks? And then that just exploded. Not only do we participate in Jim's events, but we've been a speaker a couple of times, which is great. 1 million cups certainly helps, but Jim's a bullhorn. And so he likes to, and he's very good at opening avenues. And so if you take an opportunity and you do all the hard work, and it's really hard to be an entrepreneur. You've got to do the hard work. But when you do, Jim will continue to kind of support that. And now our ecosystem is growing. And so we're known here in Wilmington, as you know, for fintech, financial technologies, and we're hoping with a couple of our startups to include David and Morris at Predicate, some other healthcare environments, that we can put an ink spot around the healthcare model here too. And Nuream wants to be a big part of that. But that's how you've got to kind of go into an environment all in, and you've got to make sure you move with the trends and meet as many people as you can, because it's not just Wilmington as an ecosystem. It's the southeastern part of North Carolina. It's all North Carolina. It's the southeast. And so that's how it continues to grow. And so you'll meet somebody, take the phone calls, follow the emails, because it's really important that you understand who is who in the zoo and who are the players and where's the trend, so you can get ahead of that trend for sure.
Absolutely. Do you happen to know a gentleman named Neil Underwood?
I know the name, but I've not connected yet.
I'll have to connect you with him.
Love it, for sure.
He and I sit on a board together at Ohanify. And when you said fintech, he's kind of like the king of the fintech area around here.
For sure.
Very impressive individual, what he's done at Encino and Live Oak Bank and now Canopy Ventures. So, but yeah, it definitely seems there's a vibe, here in Wilmington from an ecosystem for startups. And Jim, when you said bullhorn, that's a perfect analogy, him from the Midwest, huge basketball fan as well. But when you mentioned 1 million cups, we're talking about the UNC Wilmington Center of Innovation or Entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yep. So
how active are you there?
So I try to go to every week. We presented about a year and a half ago. I think we had a pretty good turnout. But what it is, and these aren't in multiple cities. I think maybe 30 or 40 cities around the country. I think it's from the Kauffman Foundation. It was the original backer. 1 million cups. The idea is have 1 million cups of coffee and listen to the new companies talk and pitch. And these are from back of cocktail napkin concepts all to a little bit more mature and robust companies. But it's an opportunity for folks in the area to come together to listen to one or two companies pitch, and then you ask them questions. And it's great feedback for the entrepreneur. It's a safe space for kind of feedback. Some of it's very constructive. Other of it's very pointed, but it gives them some ideas. And a lot of folks will do that very early in their journey, and then some will come back later and give an updated pitch. So it's great. It's Wednesday mornings at 9 o'clock. You can go online and watch it, or you can go actually to the CIE, kind of see it in person. I try to go in person, but with the travel schedule, it's hard to do that. But I do try to be there as much as possible. A to listen, to be aware, certainly as an investor, but B, to continue to give back to the other entrepreneurs in the environment.
Yeah, how important is that to you, to be a mentor to the next generation?
100%. 100%. I tell everybody in the bakery and in all of our businesses, our job is to teach, train, and mentor. Right? If we're not investing in those three areas from a human capital perspective, then we're not doing the right thing. And so I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made more mistakes than I really would care to kind of remember. But the hope is that we can give back to give the next generation of entrepreneurs an opportunity to be aware of some of the traps and pitfalls. You know, the other thing I say, certainly on things like this, or when I'm giving kind of speeches in Jim's environment or elsewhere, you know, folks would want to listen to somebody who they believe is somewhat successful or a company has done things right. I caution them that journey is not your journey, right? Take it as a data point, as a subset, learn from it, but don't try to mimic it 100%, because there are no two journeys that are the same. And that's where it's important to continue to mentor. And mentorship shouldn't be a one-time deal either. It should be over time, because things move, the business moves, entrepreneurs mature, the team matures. And so you need different expertise at different levels. But certainly giving back is one of the things we do. In the military, it's the same way, right? If you're not paying it forward, in the military, we often say we try to work ourselves out of a job, depending on where you are in the military. The military's been around a long time, so you may think you're the most important battalion commander that's doing something, but there's 7 folks that are right behind you that can do just as well. So you have to make an impact very, very quickly, and your impact is by the generations of young officers, young non-commissioned officers, and young soldiers that remember, hey, I remember when General Cooley said X, Y, and Z. That goes a long way.
Now, you've been in Wilmington for a while, right?
I've been in and out of Wilmington since the late 90s, yeah.
Okay. And are you, other than Jim's Whale Fund, are you active investor in other startups in the community, or?
So I've invested 4 through Jim.
Okay.
And I'm looking at a couple other outside of Jim's environment.
Okay.
But also a lot of the powders is inside of Nuream right now, which is
right.
which is important too. But you can't put all your eggs in one basket, certainly. But you do identify some really unique opportunity, and you want to. It's the giving back is a financial give back also. That helps a lot at certain points in times on the entrepreneurial journey, for sure.
Well, 100%. The network here in Wilmington is grateful for your contributions and people like yourself who spend the time to educate and incentivize and motivate, you know, the students at UNC Wilmington and the other startups in the area. It's impressive, and it's very exciting.
I would say the same to you. You know, what you're doing here is really amazing. Not only you with your journey and your experience, but your ability to kind of really think through some complex problems. And then, you know, a podcast like this is amazing. So thank you for what you do.
Oh,
it's a big part. And I think as we continue to grow, I did another podcast last week with Chris Capone. And then we did one with Greb Beat. I mean, the more that we can put that bullhorn out and talk about what's going on here with the right people, I think goes a long way. So again, thank you for what you do. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've been here in this area. We've been coming here for about 20 years, I guess, and vacationing in the summertime. But I'm originally from North Carolina, but moved to Northern Virginia, which you're very familiar with.
All too familiar with these days, yeah.
But as far as like investing in businesses, I always wanted to, but never really had the opportunity until we did some real estate things here. And then, you know, making some connections in Wilmington and making some investments, you know, some other companies, and getting in with Jim and his network. It's been transforming. So it's great. It's awesome. Now, where are you from originally? You said you were from New Jersey, or?
Yeah, so I went to high school in New Jersey. So when I was born, my dad was in the Army. So I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico at Sandia Air Force Base. Then he left the Army after that. And then we moved 9 times before I finished high school, like a military family, but he was out of the Army. So I did all 4 years in Jersey. And then I mentioned that he started his company with my college fund my senior year in high school. Didn't have any more money.
What was that company?
So that company was called YMC Incorporated. It was a biotech pharma company that did drug discovery, drug formulation.
Okay.
So we were a chemical engineering kind of firm that looked at assays to very quickly identify new potential drug formulations, from benchtop to all the way to kind of manufacturing.
Was that his background, chemical engineering?
That was.
Okay.
And he had worked for Pfizer in the past. He had worked for Waters Associates in this kind of chemical separation environment. And he knew that he could do it better, cleaner, faster, and that's what he did, but with my college fund. And so somehow got accepted to West Point, was not the model cadet while I was at West Point, got in a little bit of trouble, but that's just fine. They let me out, and then really liked the camaraderie of the military. It's about the people. There were some bad days, some tough, long deployments, But when it comes down to it, it's really about the people doing some amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And then left the active duty after the first Gulf War, and then missed it enough to get back into the Army Reserve. And then I stayed in the Army Reserve for another 25 years or so. And it's great. So I have friends in every port. I have people all over the world that we dealt with in some really dynamic environments, Iraq, Afghanistan, some other sporty spots inside the Middle East, that continue to email me and say, hey, Cooley, whatever the rank is, we miss you. You and your folks did a great job for us. We appreciate it. And that goes a long way. And every time I get one of those, I turn around and share it with everybody who's on that team, because it really does go a long way.
Do you know a guy by the name of General Joe Anderson?
I do know the name Joe Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody in the Army is, oh yeah, I know Joe. Yeah. He and I sit on a board together in Northern Virginia, and we try to pass deals back and forth to one another. And I know he went to West Point, and
Sure
his
did.
son went to West Point. How was that experience for you? You said you had some fun.
No, it was a great, looking backwards in the rearview mirror. I was not your model cadet, so I had a little bit of a problem with authority. I'm still working through it. Got in trouble.
As we all.
Got in trouble a couple hundred. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm what they call a double sentry man. So every time you get in trouble, they give you a demerit, and a couple of demerits means you have to walk the area. So I had more than 200 area tours, which means I was literally on the area from getting in trouble my spring break of freshman year to the end of my junior year, and then got in more trouble my senior year, because that whole thing about authority was troubling to me, and my mouth got ahead of my mind sometimes, and I said some things that probably shouldn't have. But I did okay. I learned a lot of lessons, and when you're knocked down is when you really got to figure out how to get back up and brush yourself off. And
Was
be
that
better.
the motivating factor why your dad spent your college funds on startup? It's like, yeah, you need to go there.
I couldn't spell Army before he told me that. I was that little high school kid in New Jersey who knew it all, getting recruited to play baseball, perhaps down here in the South.
Okay.
But nobody would sign a scholarship until after the spring season. I said, well, I don't want to stay in Northern Jersey. So, of course, then I went to school in New York. And it was just a great opportunity. I didn't know it until you're kind of looking back at it. But my friends there at West Point, that Rolodex is strong. So as soon as there's a problem or a concern or a question, I pick up the phone, and literally there's 1,000 people on the other end if I need to talk to somebody. And that does include all the other classes. And we do that. We mentioned we had a kind of West Point Founders Day this past weekend.
Right.
We had graduates from just 2 years ago all the way to kind of the early 60s. And there's a bond there. It's a palpable physical bond. And then we had our Naval Academy buddies upstairs, and there's a bond with them too. It's a brotherhood and sisterhood. It's a little bit like the brotherhood and sisterhood in the entrepreneurial startup space, but different, right? Those bonds are forged in blood, fire, water. It does sound a lot like the entrepreneur space. And a lot of those folks are entrepreneurs. It's just different to be an innovator and an entrepreneur inside of this very structured thing called the military. But there's ways to do it. And when you do it very, very successfully. And the organization that's been pretty strong in terms of following rank and order then can see a different way to do it. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, the most successful startups I've found is military experienced leaders. Like obviously the old saying is you bet on the jockey, not the horse. And usually I look for, demonstrated leadership capabilities, because, startups are going to have good days and bad days, but it's the leadership that's going to pull you through, to make sure that you can see the next day and not go bankrupt. Case in point, there was a gentleman by the name of Blake Hall who launched a company called Troop Swap back in 2009. And he came out of 2 tours in Iraq, went to Harvard, got his MBA, and he was raising some funds. And one of the companies that I invest with, Blue Venture Investors out of Northern Virginia. And I immediately just said, that guy, I would get behind him. Whatever company he led, it's going to be successful. You could just tell,
Right.
the grit and the determination, the resilience. You can't teach that in a classroom. You really has to be forged by experience.
I agree 100%. And we see that in the military. And when I invest, I too bet on the team. Now, the military is used to operating in chaos all the time and uncertainty. And then you throw in dynamic operating environments. And those who can do it well are very, very successful. So I take the same approach. Certainly the team, and if there's military background in there or somebody on the team has that military kind of structure to them, I feel more comfortable, at least on the decision-making side of it. They're able to think through very complex dynamic environments and come to an answer. but then look at second and third order effects and really kind of anticipate what's around the corner. We call that over the hill and around the corner. And if you have the ability to kind of sense that and it can intuit, then I would bet on that team for sure.
I know like civilian employees that work for like the intelligence community I'm familiar with. There's a transition. I think it's 2 months, 6 months, but they go through a process where they transition from government life to private sector. And, you know, they make introductions and they kind of go through and educate you on, hey, here's how the life works on the other side, and try to like, here you go, you know. Is there anything like that for the startup community, for the military, for people like yourself that want to come out of the military service and jump right into the phrase of entrepreneurship?
There are a couple. John Panacione is part of Warrior Rising and Vet to CEO. The Honor Foundation is here in town. It deals primarily with transitioning special operations folks. There are a lot of groups that try to do it, but oftentimes they're smaller and very regionally based, and you've got to get the right people to be the mentors as well. It comes with a lot of backing. So the Honor Foundation does it very, very well. They've got a lot of kind of corporate money that comes in. A lot of the transitioning guys have continued to put money back into it. So the answer is yes, there are some. The military, you know, unfortunately doesn't do a very good job of preparing their exiting war fighters or warriors to enter the non-military space. We try, we don't have the right skill sets or the right capability to even have them prepare write a resume the right way, right? In the military, it's a different language, different culture, different lexicon, and you've got to take a 22-page summary of your jobs and turn it into a 1-page, very thoughtful resume and CV that somebody wants to hire from, and really just want to do is start the conversation. And so while there are organizations, the best thing to do is use the networks, right? Is to call up those people that have mentored you in the past that are now made the transition, to have them give you that heads up of really what's going on in the world. And so oftentimes folks will want to retire to a certain location. So that will minimize their ability to find a particular job. And so you've got to have those conversations with them because they're just not used to that, right? They've been, for 20, 30 years, the Army, military, Marine Corps told them where to go, what to wear, what time to get up,
right? And
think in a very structured model. You know, a lot of that structure goes away. And some folks have a hard time in that very kind of open environment. The structure's gone, their team is gone, the camaraderie is not there. I mean, it's not as collaborative in the industry world as it is in the military world. So it takes some adjustment period. You know, we on the Army Reserve side and the National Guard, because we have a foot in both camps, we have a foot in the uniform side and the civilian side, we're a little easier in terms of, you know, moving back and forth in those different kind of cultures. Some of the active duty folks have a little bit more difficulty transitioning.
So having served over almost 4 decades, it seems, you've seen a lot of different leadership styles, from administration down to deployments and in the military. What is your current thought where things are today, where they used to be?
As we talked about a little earlier, the military's been around for a long, long time, and it's meant to be the calming influence, right? So we swear an oath, and not many folks swear oaths anymore and understand what the true meaning behind an oath is. But to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that's a big deal. And the one thing about the military is you see leadership very, very quickly. So commanders will be there for a year and a half, 18 months, 2 years, maybe 3 years at most, and then you rotate through. So either you as a commander can test your leadership skills, or you as a subordinate can watch a number of leaders very, very quickly. I am ultimately confident that the military will be in a great spot. I think some of the uncertainty at the federal level in Northern Virginia right now is putting some ripples inside of all the organizations, to include the Department of Defense. But I'm confident that leadership will do the right thing. Leadership needs to do the right thing, but everybody below them needs to do the right thing as well. And so we have accountability down to Private Cooley, right? The most junior person in the Army or the military has to understand what their job is. I think we're doing some incredible opportunities in raising the salaries we're trying to pay some of our young soldiers, just to put them on par so that, right, their families aren't struggling with food insecurity. And this military is an absolute lifestyle. We live on bases in many cases, but it's important that the leadership, who oftentimes have been riding a desk for a long, long time, understand what it's like to be back in the trenches. And I say in the trenches, not overseas, but in the trenches, being Private Cooley with a wife, 2 kids, struggling to make kind of ends meet. And what does that mean when you ask me to go do certain things around the world? I need to have some assurances my family's going to be set. And the whole thing kind of post-service, what does it mean for retirees? The VA is in a difficult spot. Lots and lots of our veterans are in some really difficult mental and physical places right now, not just from what we've done for the last 25 years, but for decades. And so we really need to be thoughtful and judicious about how we help those folks around the world.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a comment. You said Northern Virginia is going through an adjustment. I would say a shocking adjustment at this point. You know, people being laid off because of Doge and other things. But, you know, to be honest, I mean, there's a lot of bloat in the federal government.
Yep.
And unless you can see it day to day, you really don't understand. And you read what's in the newspaper or listen to what the media tells you. But it needed to happen. There's some adjustments. I mean, what is it? Our expenditures GDP is now 123%. That means we're paying more in expenses than what we're actually producing. And I think if people truly understood that, like, wait a minute, our expenses are more than our income, sort of like what you do at home.
Right.
You know, if your bills are higher than what you're making, then you're working in a deficit. You need to make some adjustments. You need to cut back on some things.
I agree.
And this has been kind of long overdue, in my opinion.
I would agree with you. I can't speak for the other departments, but, you know, the Department of Defense had some opportunities to improve. I'll just be very, very clear. And they see that. And they're aware of it. And I know that they're working on it right now. The interesting thing with the Department of Defense is that we're always flying a deterrent airplane and building it at the same time. So while we're restructuring, we still have to do certain things. And the deterrence is what we want to do. We want to be a force that's visible in as many places as we can, so the bad guys are deterred because they don't want us to turn on the other half of the military, which is go win. And what we need our civilian leaders to do is, right, not put us out there unnecessarily, but put us in a place to be successful when the end goal is to win. And that's very different than the way we've been fighting for the last couple of decades. None of us will have a hard time going in harm's way, but we'd like to have the ability to do our job and do it well. And tell us what the end state is. Let us know what the goal is, and we'll do what we can. But don't put us out there unnecessarily. Don't put us out there in front of the other portions of geopolitical influence.
Right.
And then we'll do our job. We will absolutely do our job.
So one of the common elements I've learned with this podcast and talking to folks like yourself is that growing up, there's always been some influential person that has created the sense of urgency and that spark or desire to kind of be ambitious and really put your foot forward. And it sounds like your dad was that for you. Is that accurate?
My dad and my grandfather. So my grandfather, little Sicilian, red hair, blue eyed gentleman, told me, Robbie, when you're thinking about what you're doing in life, if you're the assistant broom cleaner, be the best assistant broom cleaner that you can. And then his other comment to me was, be careful of the asses you're chewing today because they're the butts you're kissing tomorrow.
That's interesting concept.
So it was very interesting. And so he's got a whole book full of pop-up-isms, we call them. But so he instilled in me very, very early the thought of, if I ask you to do something, do it and do it to the end and continue to do it until you have learned everything and you're an expert on it, and then teach somebody else. Then my dad gave me the other side of it, which is, hey, when we're going to do something, let's think through this and let's do it all in. So the two of them have been most influential in our family. So I think it is, entrepreneurship and innovation comes through DNA. Not everybody should be in the military. Not everybody should be an entrepreneur.
Right.
And the entrepreneur, the other thing that they really both taught us is how to fail well, fail fast. So you're going to get knocked down, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to miss a due date or something. But it's how do you respond to that? You can feel sad for about 30 seconds, but you got to get back up and kind of figure out what the next step is.
Right.
And that was very family driven. There wasn't a lot of, hand holding and that kind of stuff growing up. It was, hey, we made a mistake. What are we going to learn from it? What are we going to do next?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's where the ultimate growth happens, through failure.
100%.
Without failure, you don't really understand what you need to do next and how to adjust and pivot and move forward.
Yep.
Yeah. My dad had a similar quote. He basically said, don't half-ass anything. You got to be all in, like you said, and whatever you decide to do in life, be all in, give it 110%.
That's right.
Be the best of what you have. So that's awesome. So once you joined the military, you went active duty. And then you switched to reserve.
I did.
You said you transitioned into private sector.
I did.
Yeah.
So my dad started his company with my college fund, grew it. So about 8 years later, he said, I'd love for you to come back and kind of help us.
Okay.
So I was stationed in Hawaii. I was getting ready to go back to the Field Artillery Advanced Officers course, and then
Okay.
I was going to go to Europe after that. So it was a big decision. I started actually, again, the military is really interesting. A lot of opportunity and challenges. And I said, we're coming out of the Gulf War. Things are a little different now. The Army often goes in these cycles. We were in kind of one of these low periods. So I said, let me try my foot in the other side. So I agreed to leave, joined him. He had moved the company from Jersey down here to Wilmington, North Carolina. Hence, that's how I got here. And it was great. It was a great opportunity, again, to leverage a lot of the junior leader lessons in the military into this thing called the civilian world. And chemistry, chemical engineering was my background by kind of trade and study. It was a natural fit. And I had been around this business now for 8, 9, 10 years. And so I kind of knew it. And I was really excited about what we could do with the company. And then 4 years later, we sold it. My dad had a great exit. I signed a bunch of non-compete clauses. My golf game couldn't get any worse. And then I was the guy who drove up on the last day to Carolina to Keenan Flagler to drop off my MBA submission. And somehow they picked me up as well. And that was a great 2 years. And then from there, I was hired again by Deloitte, and then from there, Philips Medical Systems. So it's a crazy kind of corporate ride.
So you were working with your dad's company through the exit.
I was, yep.
Yeah. How was that process?
So here's another thing for entrepreneurs. We love our babies. We love our businesses. And sometimes we get too close to it, and we want to kind of squeeze it and suffocate it. And my dad was that, right? It was his startup. It was his company. We were partnered with a company in Japan. And I had a little bit more of an arm's length transaction, so I could step away from the emotion behind it and then do the hard work, which was, so there were 3 months in a row where every other week I was flying from Wilmington to Tokyo to negotiate the deal to make sure we got it done. Because my dad had become too close to the business and wasn't able to kind of separate business from emotion and family. And then we got it done. It was a great deal, and everybody shook hands at the end of it. But it was interesting to kind of flow through that exit portion of it. International lawyers. Want to talk about international business school? Go sell a company overseas pretty quickly.
Right.
You can't learn that in a book. So that was great. But when I got to MBA school, I had been in a startup, had an exit of a startup. I had been in the Army for about 10 years. I had done some things. I think I was older than some of my professors. And so for me, sitting in the back of some of the classes at Keenan Flag were really interesting because I had a little bit more of the life experience view to an academic PhD who had gone from undergrad to grad to PhD and was very, very good on the theory. And I could apply the theory to it in kind of different environments. But yeah, Keenan Flag was a great program.
Yeah. I had a buddy who tried to buy a company from a Japanese conglomerate. And we invested 8 months of negotiating back and forth. And it was weird because it's family-owned business in Japan. And I guess the hierarchy has to speak and whatever, and some person wasn't available at one certain time. So routinely, it would take them 3 or 4 weeks to respond.
Absolutely.
To any type of term and condition. And it just, after 8 months, he's like, you know what? Man, screw this. I can't do this.
So it is hard. And there's another lesson there is to understand the culture you're operating in. The Japanese culture is different than the Chinese culture. I spent a decade with Philips Medical Systems working in and out of China, and that's a whole nother environment. But the Japanese are very set in their business culture. There's a hierarchy, the way you sit at a table, there's a hierarchy who speaks. And if you don't know that, the Japanese will out-negotiate you because we Americans, they understand our culture better than we understand their culture. So stereotypically, they will have a lot of silence in a meeting. And Americans feel uncomfortable with silence. In their business structure, they're just thinking. In our world, we think we made a mistake. And so we start to out-negotiate ourselves very, very quickly. Okay, so 10 million is not right. It must be 8 million. And they're just sitting there thinking. Don't think. Let them have that time. If you understand your points, then stick to your guns. But don't start to out-negotiate yourself because you will do that very, very quickly. Then they'll smile and they go through the same process. And then if 8's not good enough in your mind, then it must be 6. But if you don't know that, and it's not just Japan, it's in the Middle East, it's in Europe, right? Everybody has their own unique business style. You've got to do your due diligence and prep before you go into those environments, either to grow a business, to extend a product line, but certainly on an exit or some type of acquisition, make sure you find the right expertise to help you there.
Yeah. Was it a good exit for your family?
Yeah, it was good. For sure. My dad never had to work again. Again, my golf game was terrible. So
we'll get into that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm just curious, on a multiple of EBITDA, is that how you evaluate it? Multiple sales, revenue, or EBITDA?
So the answer is yeah. So there's 100 different ways to value a company. The only one that really is important is between the buyer and the seller. And so we were a strategic fit more than a multiple of EBITDA or net sales to this particular company. It was actually the largest company in this industry, and we had some very unique intellectual property and some solutions, and that's what they were buying more than an EBITDA.
Right. So you patented some technology that they wanted.
We had some patents. We had some solutions. The other thing we had were relationships. And in the pharmaceutical world, because of the FDA certification regulations, if you change a process, you've got to go back and do complete recertification. And that's just very, very costly. So there was intrinsic value into the relationships that we had built up as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I look for in startups when I make investments is intellectual property and patents.
Sure.
I know it's very difficult to have a patent because you're just starting a business, but because it's expensive to go through the patent process. But if you're really determined and you really believe in your solution, then you need to patent the technology.
Agreed.
If it's something that's unique and take that risk off the table, because having a patent provides extra validation and protection from your investment.
I agree 100%. The interesting thing is at Philips Medical Systems, right, large Fortune 50 company, we had lots of patents. But then what we also did is we created a culture inside of our engineering department. We literally did a Moore's Law calculation because we were operating around the world, especially in China, how quickly our technology and science would be copied. And so we had to introduce our next series and next issue of technology and innovation 3 months before that their copied product would come to the market. So we wanted to out innovate them, and we built a culture in a community that was very different from what large Philips had, but we were successful. So we knew if the Chinese were going to copy us in 18 months, we'd have to deliver our next product 15 months, and it just got faster and faster. And then when you build that culture inside and you complement the IP structure and the foundation with a culture of innovation, now those are the two best things. So I look for patented technology in my world, but I also look for a culture that's not going to rest on its laurels and continues to out innovate, because we know, right, once you have a patent, everybody can see it, and then competition comes at you pretty quickly. So if you don't build that internal team to kind of outthink everybody else, you're not going to. You may win in the short term, but not in the long term. And then what we found is, we would find interesting pockets of intellectual property that we had no thought when we were building X, Y, and Z. And those were the ones that actually became the most valuable, because that was the next generation of true kind of market trend or product trend or science trend. And then we were ahead of it, and which was really kind of fun as well.
Remind me again, chemical engineering, biotechnology. What was your dad's business?
So YMC Incorporated was a drug discovery, drug formulation company. So we did high performance liquid chromatography, which is the science of separation.
Right.
So we were able to help the large pharmaceutical and biotech companies do very rapid drug assay, which is when you either find a drug or a chemical compound, or you make one. Is it going to be? What's the efficacy towards a particular disease state or morbidity? So with our science, you're able to test that very, very quickly, and that's what we call benchtop. And then we help them all the way through kind of production. So we were working with Eli Lilly, with Pfizer, with Genentech, Biogen, all the big pharmaceutical companies from the start at the bench all the way to the production of the drug. And that was a lot of fun.
And is that technology still used today?
Sure is.
Yeah,
sure is. People have used that in the alcohol business. Right? It's a separation. People have used that to break down. Untapped did it in very similar science to look at the chemical compounds of wines and beers to see if that'd be something that you would like the taste of, which is interesting. So that chemistry, that science is still there for sure.
And can that be applied to other industries like petroleum or
It sure can.
Yeah.
It actually, the technology has come a long way. There's now kind of materials-based technology that look at affinity to bring certain chemical compounds onto this material and then protect those and let everything else flow through, because that's your target compound, and then you can just kind of clean it off later. Now you have a pure sample.
Right.
And we were doing that with these big, huge test tubes, essentially made of steel and silica. And we would put chemicals bonded onto them, and you would find a target that would bond to that chemical on your silica, and then you would flush it off at the end. So all the garbage goes through, and then you wait, and then you just release the actual pure. Now you've got the pure drug that you were looking for.
Yeah.
It's fun.
That's fantastic.
It was great.
That's a very unique experience. Not many people have, the opportunity to go through a startup to an exit and kind of see the beginning to the end and how it transitions into another business. And,
absolutely. It was amazing. And I was also fortunate. I got to live in Japan for about 4 or 5 months. So when I came off active duty and knew I was going to join the company, both the Japanese leadership and our leadership here in the States thought it'd be a great idea for me to spend time in Japan to understand the business. So it was amazing. So it's talking about learning the culture, right? Living in the culture.
This was post-acquisition?
This was pre. This was me leaving active duty before I joined YMC officially.
Okay.
To learn the business from the inside out.
Got it.
So now I understood a little bit more of the Japanese culture, the Japanese science, the way they think, the way they develop innovation and technology, the way they think about businesses. All of that is really kind of important for my making. Understand my foundational understanding, and that helped us kind of grow very, very rapidly when I got back to Wilmington.
Mm-hmm. Was there any work you had to do post-acquisition? Because I know a lot of people think that selling a company is great and have a big party and exit, and then you can
for sure
transition to something else. But typically,
6 months.
There's a lot of work after the fact.
There's a ton of work. We sold. We sold in I think June. I still had really kind of June until I started at Keenan Flagler to be there full time. This was 97.
97. Okay.
97.
Okay.
Yep. So I was there full time to make sure we were transitioning with the purchaser, and then the science and the technology, and then all the relationships. So there was a lot of flying to all the pharmaceutical and biotech companies to do the handoff from one to the other, to make sure in their mind that it was going to be a smooth, seamless transition, and make sure on the acquirer side that they knew who all the right players were. And then for 6 months while I was at business school, I would have to spend a couple hours every day, and that kind of tapered off. But usually it's at least a 6 month process post-acquisition for sure.
Because it was a foreign buyer, did you have to go through any regulations and approvals with the government?
All of them, both of them, right? Yeah, okay. For sure. We weren't large enough to turn dials from kind of an SEC particular situation, but we did. We had to get approvals from the Japanese plus the American government to make it just a standard acquisition like this.
And do you see that a continuing trend where foreign buyers buying American IP?
I hope we have less foreign buyers buying U.S. domestic intellectual property and products. I think we need to really generate some internal growth. Certainly chips. If you look at some of the high tech, just our supply chain vulnerability, we really need to do a lot more onshore manufacturing and domestic production.
Right.
But in the interim, there's going to be a lot of, and most businesses are going to go global at some point. And so you really have to be thoughtful and judicious on who on your your international intellectual property team, your international business team, and your international council, because rules and regulations change pretty quickly. And you don't want to, a tariff is a great kind of opportunity. If you don't understand the impact of tariff today, what it means to tomorrow, you may make some short-term decisions that put your business at a deficit in terms of looking really longer term. And on the flip side, if you have a footprint in Asia or the Middle East or in Europe, there's other implications on the back end of it too. So you got to be really, really global in mind in the way you think about either growth or certainly on the acquisition side as well.
What is your opinion on how we can turn the channel on that idea, knowing that one of the biggest contributing factors is the cost of labor? And one of the reasons people go offshore is because it's much cheaper. Not even talking about human rights and all the other issues, but the cost of labor and insurance and just doing business here in the United States is way more expensive than going over to Asia and other areas.
So over time, you and I have been around a little. We've seen people go offshore. We saw a lot of business in manufacturing, third, fourth party logistics and manufacturing go to China and go to Asia, go to Mexico. And that was based on a financial calculus of cost of labor primarily. When you look more deeply in the true costs of the business, and then you look at things like supply chain vulnerability and access to key materials and raw materials, and some of the human rights issues in some of the other countries, there is the financial currency issue, but there's also a social currency kind of component that's a little bit more intangible. But I think COVID showed us pretty quickly that we're going to have a lot more of that domestic capability here. and I say here, right on the contiguous 48, or certainly, within the 50 states, just so that we have a little bit more control over it. We've been very comfortable as a society in buying, 8-foot television for about $150 right now, and there's going to be a little bit of pain in the wallets. But I mean, we've also demonstrated our own fiscal responsibilities a little upside down with more than $1 trillion plus now in credit card debt. That's not a smart consumer on the domestic side. So we've got to be very, very careful. But the bottom line is we can't, certainly in today's uncertain geopolitical, chaotic, frantic space, we can't allow key portions of our supply chain, and not just the Department of Defense, but in technology, chips, AI, power generation, right? All the things that are ancillary to really us being able to do what we want to do. We should have a lot more of it here. And does that come at an additional cost? It sure does.
Right.
But the cost of not having it available and somebody turning off the light switch at a different point is going to be even more costly as well.
And one of the reasons why, the raw materials and the minerals that go into the silicon and the chips are going to be valuable in the future, because that's where the growth is going to happen, is automation and computers and technology. It was shocking to see the transition. I was reading something a couple weeks ago about how China has been making some serious investments in Africa, and in other parts of the world, and even the Caribbean. There was an article about how China's starting to put stations and presence in some of these areas, and this seems like they're creeping all over the world. And we, like you said, we need to be a little more assertive with our own dominance to protect the future. What do you think of Trump's plan?
Can I speak to that one first?
Sure.
So you're talking about the One Belt, One Road initiative from China.
Yes,
and
yes.
As a guy in the military who's been around the world, I've seen it firsthand. So the Chinese have a very bold plan to grow, right? They want to go back to the Silk Road model, the One Belt, One Road, and they're doing it through the debt trap strategy. So they're making huge investments in Asia, in the Middle East, and in Africa, knowing that the country that they're dealing with, whether it's building a port or a pipeline or a railroad or a highway, that they'll never be able to pay it back. And it's done by design. So wherever I was in Africa, there would be one Rob Cooley and a couple of our soldiers. There'll be 100 Chinese with bags and bags of yuan and renminbi. Most of the African nations, most of the nations around the world would rather partner with the U.S., but we've demonstrated our lack of true partnership ability in the last couple of years. And if we're offering $1 to help support, the Chinese are offering $1,000, it's a pretty easy financial calculation. So they've been very, very good at what they're doing, and their intent is not to spread true economic growth. The Chinese are there specifically to remove raw materials and have access points that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Right.
So their first overseas base was in Djibouti. They didn't put it in Djibouti because I thought that was a really interesting country. They put it there because that was the hub of the United States African kind of impact in there. So literally everywhere Rob went in Africa, there would be a Chinese team following us around because they wanted to know what we were doing, how we were doing it, who we were talking to. So that debt trap strategy is going to be very, very problematic because now the Chinese are calling their debts due. And there's classic examples of folks defaulting on their loans, and now the Chinese have access to it. They didn't even go in there with the ability to teach the African nations or the Asian nations how to do things. They literally brought engineering battalions out of the Chinese army to set it up. They built Chinatowns that local people really weren't allowed to go into. So it wasn't a collaboration of any sense. And the Chinese are still treated on the global space as a developing country. And their cost of capital is a lot less. But if you look at China right now, they're in trouble, not only from societal impact. The one-child law has put them upside down for quite a while, but they're not able to grow as much as they had. Right? They their internal growth has stalled. I mean, you can literally look at in China the buildings that have been built, the neon alleys that
are empty,
completely empty, and their real estate markets are collapsing very, very quickly, and they can't bring in capital, hard currency. So there's a lot, but the Chinese have been very, very good at what they do. Lots of public play in terms of perhaps influencing elections illegally. around. And again, when buckets of cash come over, it's hard for some folks in nations that are really starved for cash to say no to that. So they're very, very good at what they do. How does the U.S. respond to that is going to be very, very important. And this is not just the Taiwan issue. This is not just the South China Sea issue, but this is a global impact, pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty scary when you think about what the next 20, 30, 50 years will look
Absolutely.
like. Yeah, definitely the trend's not good. They say the trend's your friend. In that case, it doesn't look very good.
You got to be careful. You got to watch and anticipate.
Right.
And we have some very dynamic senior leaders in these countries right now.
So with all this unique experience, both in the military, geopolitical, and your dad's business, and applying that through a mergers and acquisitions process, you must have been very popular in your MBA class at UNC.
We have a great group. So while the military is a bunch of brotherhood and sisterhood, on my Carolina side as well, we had just some amazing individuals, and we all helped each other out. We had guys that were financiers that have done very, very well on Wall Street, in the banking space, a lot of startup companies, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of self-made folks, which is great. But I would, again, when I looked at a number of different business schools, I thought the collegial environment of Keener Flagler was where I would do better at. And it was spot on. I had a chance to do a semester abroad in Australia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was not too shabby either. But really, those are the best friends you have. So if I have any issues on Wall Street or banking or finance, those are the guys that I'll call up pretty quickly. And then it's behind the curtain. You don't have to worry about any kind of nonsense. Yeah. And you get the no kidding. Here's the risks. Here's the rewards. How can I help you? And that's what it always ends up with is, how can I help you?
I know your daughter, you said she was at Campbell.
She was at Campbell, first year medical school.
And your two older sons. Did any of them attend UNC or did they go to here in North Carolina?
Nope.
Where did they go to school?
So when they were coming up, I said, if you want to go into the military, I'll support you, but don't follow my shoes because it's not probably the right one. And this family's done quite a bit for the military. My middle sister was in the Army. My dad was in the Army. So, we've been a military family. It's really a family business now. 70% of all the people who join the military come from a military family. And I wasn't going to push them into the military, but they've done very, very well in their places. And so Abby was accepted to Chapel Hill, but she went to Campbell University. She thought the smaller school would be more to her liking, and she's on her third degree right now. So I guess she's doing okay at Campbell.
That's
for
great.
Sure. Yeah. And then Robbie went to University of Mount Olive and studied agribusiness. Okay. And now he's in Dallas and he sells information for Gartner. And then Grayson, he did go to Chapel Hill.
You have one.
We have one. We have one grad. We were so happy last night when the selection committee gave us a nod in the big dance, which we didn't think was going to happen, which is great. And then he went off to Boston College, got his law degree. Okay. And now he's in Charleston too. So we are quite fortunate and humble as a family to be in such a great spot.
Yeah, Boston area is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Not in the wintertime, but
not in the wintertime. That's why I live down here in the South now, for sure.
Yeah. The winters in the Northeast are kind of brutal.
Yeah, and it's getting worse. And when you come out to your car and you have to shovel snow off the top of your car, that's time for me to leave.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter, she goes to school near Boston, and this was the first year. She's been there. She's a junior, but this is the first year they actually had real Boston snow. Last couple of years, it kind of been really a nothing burger.
Global warming.
Yeah, but she would call routinely just upset. Oh my God, it's 15 inches of snow again.
I love Boston. I love that city. I think it's my favorite city on the East Coast.
Yeah, Boston's great.
It is.
Yeah. I could live there, just not in the wintertime.
I'd have to be a second home for sure.
Right.
Spring and summer.
Yeah, going to a baseball game at Fenway, such fun.
I'm a Red Sox and a Cubs fan.
Are you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when you go back to two stadiums that were built in the early 1900s, it's part of nostalgia for sure.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
Yep.
Would recommend that to anybody just to go see a Red Sox game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually just saw the Dropkick Murphys a couple weeks ago in concert, speaking of Boston. So it's crazy Irish rock band.
Oh, they're so much fun. They're great. I've listened to a lot of them over the weekend for St. Patrick's Day, which is today for sure. So,
yeah. Do anything for St. Patrick's Day, or
we're gonna go out and try to find some corned beef and cabbage. Oh yeah, and get a couple pints of Guinness for sure.
Yeah, you have to.
I must do.
So after your dad's exit,
Yep.
what happened after that? Did he want to get back, and is that where you kind of ventured in some of these other entrepreneurial areas, or?
Well, that's when I went off to business school and then
Okay.
kind of went on that path. And then he stayed connected for sure. So he was always consulting with a couple folks in similar businesses. And then he started to get smart and he said, I like fly fishing. So he went to work with a fly fishing company that manufactured Van Staal reels. And he's been a fly fisherman ever since. So that's what great exits give you the opportunity to do is do what you want to do when you want to do it. And he's done that for years and years. And actually, so he's 85 years old now, and he's still on phone calls with some of the companies that he's been working with. So he's always in the game. And I think that's also part of the DNA of an entrepreneur is you're never out of it, but you can get out of it as much as you want to. And then you can kind of move and apply your skills and resources in some really fun spots.
Right. So when was it that you decided to throw your hat in the ring and be a business owner?
So, I mean, I think I was an entrepreneur back in kind of grade school, right? I was the guy who strapped my lawnmower to the back of my bike in New Jersey and rode up and down the hills mowing people's lawns. And I said, that's a little crazy. Then I hired a couple of folks to help me do it. Yeah. And I did that, before being a lifeguard, and then hired some lifeguard folks to do that. And then, finished high school that way and just kept that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. One is I'm not very good at being bored. I get myself in even more trouble that way. And so these were all fun things and you get to try and test and you do some fun things with some great folks. And that's really what it comes down to about the people. And then apply that in West Point a little bit, sometimes a little bit too much. Like I said, got in a little bit of trouble. And then in the Army the same way. And then, that's a leadership learning lab. And then you apply that in the civilian side. And because I was running those labs concurrently for so long, I could test something in the military and see how it applied and worked, and I would then try to do that in the civilian side or flip back and forth, and that was really, really helpful for me. Yeah. So sometimes, the bakery, I have to remember who I'm speaking to because the language is different. If you're going to teach, bakers about leadership and mentorship, it's a very different lexicon than it is talking to a bunch of folks in the military. We love our analogies in the military, and they don't work very well in the baking world or the civilian world. So you have to be careful about what words you use and who you're speaking to.
So when did you buy the bakery?
So this is another crazy small world story. So Apple Laney's Bake Shop has been here in Wilmington for 40 years. This is our 40th year.
Okay.
My mom, both my parents were from New York. My mom was from the Bronx, and so she's used to Arthur Avenue level pastries and bakery shops and butcher shops because where she grew up. When we were living in northern Jersey, there was a bakery a couple of towns over called the Chester Bakery in Chester, New Jersey. That was by far the closest bakery that we could find to kind of Arthur Avenue, New York City style. They made my going away to West Point cake in the summer of '85. I didn't know it, but after I left, they sold Chester Bakery, moved down here, and opened up Apple Annie's Bake Shop. So the same owners that were our family friends from up there moved down here to Wilmington. When I got here, 20-something years later, I said, well, where's the best bakery? I said, by far, it's this place called Apple Annie's. I had no idea it was the same owner, same family. So I went in there, and I met the founder's name was Franklin Gordo. And we talked over time, and I never put it together. One day, I was dressed in my uniform on my way to Fort Bragg, and he was a Marine. He started his baking career in the Marines in the late 40s and early 50s. So we have black and white photos of cakes that he made for the Marine Corps birthday balls and for all the Navy admirals coming out of World War II. And he looks over at me and he says, hey, Rob, where are you going? I said, I'm in the Army Reserve. I'm going to Fort Bragg. He said, I was in the Marines. So we had to give each other a little hard time. Well, still didn't put it together. But over the next couple of months, we started to figure out that we were both from New Jersey. And I said, Frank, where are you from? He said, I'm from northern Jersey. I said, yeah, me too. Where? He says, Morris County. I said, so am I. And as soon as he said Morris County, I said, there's no way that you're the Chester Bakery. He said, how did you know that? I said, because you guys made my going away to West Point cake. And he ran in the back and actually pulled up a picture of that cake.
The order,
the actual cake. And so, again, our friendship just kind of grew from there. And then Frank passes away in the back of the bakery, covered in flour, water, doing what he loved. His son was in Florida pursuing his art career. So I called him up and said, look, I don't know how to run a bakery, but I love to eat. What do you think about selling it? He's like, yeah. 2 weeks later, I own Apple Annie's. And that's 13 years ago. And that's just been an amazing kind of opportunity to continue to keep something like Apple Annie's. That's just a fabric of the Wilmington kind of family together and grow it right now. And we're really excited about what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. Well, congratulations on the acquisition. Yeah, Apple Annie's, it's famous. There's a lot of people, a lot of fans in the community. Like you said, it's been around for a long time. one of my good friends, Rita, used to go down there and buy your mocha squares, which is kind of why.
I think maybe some may have showed up here this morning. So, and plus some other samples just in case.
She wanted me to tell you that she's really upset that they got removed from the menu because she used to order it 20 years ago.
So trends. If anybody wants any of the pastries they don't see, just call us and we make them for them. We just didn't have. We had some folks that loved them, but we didn't have enough that liked it. But those are some pretty special mocha squares that you guys have.
Yeah,
made with love.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, enjoy.
So after you own the bakery, you said that you're doing some partnerships with other businesses in the area.
Yeah,
how's that working out?
Phenomenal. So that's what Small Town Main Street is about. From a business side, is local for local. So I saw you had some end of days kind of liquor over here in the corner. We just partnered with Shane and Beth. We're using their vanillas in all of our recipes now. We're using their bourbon and their rum in our bourbon and rum products. And it's just great. We did an event with them a couple weeks ago, and there's a bourbon tasting that's coming up this week that we'll be down there showcasing some of the great chocolate products that we have that pair well with the bourbons. Danielle with Topsail Steamer, we've been a partner of theirs for years and years. We provide their key lime pies and their lemon blueberry pies and their cornbreads that they ship with their steamer bucket. So it's great. And we continue to look for those opportunities to grow and expand. We've been a partner with UNCW and their sports marketing department for a long, long time. And that's the fun part. That's part of the ability to give back.
Yeah.
The veterans in our community will come in. We have veterans that sit down, get a cup of coffee and a cherry Danish and talk to us. And some of these are World War II veterans, all the way to kind of current conflict. And it's just a quiet spot to kind of sit and talk to some folks who've been there and done that. But that's fun when you can find these opportunities. And then we have about 32 wholesale accounts in Wilmington. So these are restaurants, coffee houses, some of the better restaurants, hamburger spots in town that use our product, which is really a lot of fun.
What are your expansion plans? Sounds like you're very active in the community, but do you see yourself growing in other
We are. We just closed our Forum store. We had 2 physical locations. We closed that actually last month at the end of January. Had some issues with partnerships in the local area. But now we're focusing on trends, e-commerce. A lot of folks want their products to be able to ship. So we've custom designed specialized packaging. Not all of our products can ship very well, but cakes, pies, cheesecakes, things like that, we can get it to the West Coast and they're still frozen in 2 days. And so that's an opportunity for us to grow. And then we're looking at future brick and mortar spaces, probably across the river down in the Brunswick County area. And then we're just growing internally our wholesale account. We do wedding cakes. Hans Westermark is our TikTok sensation. He's got almost 750,000 folks that follow him. He TikTok live on Saturday mornings from the bakery. So it's just great to continue to grow like that.
That's great. Do you also have any partnerships with wedding planners to do?
We do. We do. Yeah, for sure do. Yeah. We're expanding that as well. Some of our wedding cakes are amazing. We consider ourselves the cake boss of the South. We can custom design cakes. We can do some really amazing wedding cakes. And our entire team is pretty amazing. So we talked about the importance of human capital, where we treat our employees as part of the family. And so everybody is empowered. Everybody has the ability to come up with creative ideas. We want you to try to do it the Apple Annie's Bake Shop way, which is a little different than some of the other kind of bakeries around. But our team is rock solid. It's great. And they are really passionate. They're all artists. They use flour, water, sugar, food coloring as their canvas. They really get excited when they see somebody smile for one of the cakes that we've done or a pastry that they made for somebody. It's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
So then you transitioned to the wine shop. Was that after Apple Annie's?
So then we bought the wine sampler. Again, another small world kind of story. My dad had been working there, kind of pouring wine for a while. Okay. And then was going through some interesting financial times, and he started to put some more of his own capital into it, which is great. Then we said, instead of doing this on somebody else's dime, why don't we just make an offer and buy that? And so we did. And then we brought my sister and brother-in-law. My brother-in-law, Jamie, is a small pin sommelier. He's a master brewer. He's really a unicorn of one here in the kind of Midtown and just Wilmington in general. We moved it to be a block and a half away from Apple Annie's, right off of Carr Avenue. And it's great. It is so much fun. So you combine beer and wine, you combine bakery. So now we call ourselves a sin entrepreneur, which is just a hoot. So,
and are there any synergies between the two businesses?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We bring a lot of our Apple Annie's products over to the wine sampler. We have cheese crisps that are great with red wine or charcuterie board. There's anywhere we can partner, we absolutely do.
And do you manage this yourself, or is it like a family business? Or?
So the family and I own the wine sampler. Jamie's the one who really kind of manages the business, kind of full time.
The day to day.
The day to day for sure. He's the one who's buying the wine, the beers. Again, his knowledge and experience and passion behind what he does is unmatched. If you haven't been there, come on in. We'll go sit there and have a great glass of wine and a cookie for sure.
Yeah.
And then the bakery has some great managers that have been around the block for decades that are kind of helping us. And then I'm in there, when I can. And then really the rest of the time is spent around growing Nuream.
Right. So you spend probably 5-10 hours a week between the bakery and the wine shop?
I would say that, about 5 hours. Yep.
Yeah. Which is good.
Yeah.
You kind of hands off, let the professionals run it, and
that's right.
You're overseeing things.
That's it. Tasting, sampling, quality control. That's my job. So.
Yeah. Do you manage it like a holding company? Like you have interest in both, or are there separate businesses that you have to like?
No, they are separate businesses, but they are integrated where we need to, and it gives us a lot of flexibility. But they are separate kind of P&Ls, separate entities, which allows us to either invest uniquely into one versus another, or both. And then our future plans, our future brick and mortar plans, are really to have the two of them combined. So we've drawn up designs twice before COVID.
That's why I was asking.
Right,
I think
for sure.
You're talking about the future is combining both businesses.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah,
really excited.
And what's holding you back from that? Is it just economic times?
So right now it's a little uncertain.
Yeah.
I mean, the cost of capital is a little bit exciting, and we're one of those businesses that has to be easy to get to. So trafficability is important for us. And Brunswick County is growing so rapidly right now. We're trying to find the right spot. And this time we'd like to buy dirt and build a building rather than kind of lease. And that's a dynamic kind of investment up front. And then the cost of construction right now is through the roof with just the raw materials too. So we're just waiting for the right time and the right location.
From a materials point of view, how do you handle your inventory? Do you buy in bulk?
We the answer is yes. So at the bakery, right, we'll buy pallets, and so we don't use artificial ingredients and preservatives. Yeah. So inventory management is pretty important for us,
especially with the cost of eggs, right?
Holy cow!
We don't like talk about that.
Cost of eggs, and this has been. It's actually came down a little bit in the recent few days, but not like where it's been. And we don't pass that cost to our customers. We just can't do that. But we do buy in bulk. So it's pallets of flour, pallets of sugar. We buy butter in quantities that people just would laugh at. Because that's what we use. We use real ingredients, and the real ingredients are costly.
Well, you can probably taste the difference. Yeah.
And we hope so. We hope so, right? For sure. And then the same thing on the wine side. If Jamie identifies a unique vintage or vineyard, and we have access to buy the whole lot, because it's very fractional here in North Carolina, we'll buy the whole lot, and we'll be the only one to be able to sell that in kind of southeastern North Carolina. And so we have enough purchasing power that allows us to wield that in certain places. And it's fun because when you pick unique, wines and beers that others don't have, that's why you come to the wine sampler. If you want something that's available in the grocery stores, you go there. But we're really kind of differentiated on value, education, and just experience. We have wine tasting in there. We'll bring a vineyard in that will talk about their 3 or 4 wines. We'll have a 5 or 6 course tasting with their wines, and it's a lot of fun. It sells out in about 13 seconds. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun.
Now you're transitioning into your latest venture.
Yeah, of course. So now that I'm retired from the Army, I have plenty of time to start a neurodata science company, which is fun. But Nuream is really interesting, and my partners Nathan and Lauren, brought an idea to us that was based on some NASA technology a long time ago, but it didn't work. And I say technology, it was trying to sense brain waves. The brain is really the next frontier for health, performance, wellness, and mental health issues. We just can't get to it because it's difficult with sensors that are glued to your head or devices that don't work. But the neurodata is really, really insightful and impactful. And if we can crack the code and protect it, then it's going to be really amazing. And I say protect it because at Philips Medical Systems 20 years ago, people are very concerned about your biometric information, your heart rate, everything you get off a Whoop or a Fitbit right now. If that got into the wild, people would make bad decisions. People being insurance companies. Right now, you walk by your smart refrigerator, your entire life comes up on the front of it. So people have become very comfortable over time with their biometric information, but they should not be as comfortable with their neurodata. That's really insight to you. And some of our geopolitical competitors that we just talked about are using that information to do some really malicious things to individuals. And so we've got to be very, very thoughtful and careful. But yeah, we're excited. Our patent protected materials are actually collecting brainwaves in things like pillowcases. And then comes a compression wear t-shirt and the wristband materials, the wearables that allow us to collect and curate brainwave information starting with sleep. So the devices that are out there now really have a hard time. They can tell you whether you're asleep or awake generically, or give you a direction, but they can't tell you where you slept. And I say where you slept is how long were you in each sleep stage? How do you categorize that? And then what happened that moved you out of restorative sleep, like REM or some of the other places. And so then you'll be able to run your own sleep study in your home on your pillowcase, and then we'll be able to give you a real result the next morning to see how you slept. And then you change your sleep hygiene, you change your sleep prep, and you'll be able to dial in your sleep to be as restorative as possible. And then what we're excited about is that longitudinal, right? So time over time, looking at your sleep patterns, I'll be able to see what normal looks like for you. Then I'll also be able to identify those anomalies and disturbances. And those are leading indicators of neurological disease, pending epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, onset dementia, right? Anything that the brain is going to signal well before a physiological response, we'll be able to capture that in the very small changes of your brainwave information. Same thing with mental health, right? Lack of sleep, depression are identified in changes to sleep patterns, and then we can get in front of it. The idea is that we're identifying these problems as early as we can. So earliest identification means earliest intervention, which means a better outcome on the backside, which is pretty exciting.
How did you meet the two partners that you mentioned?
So turns out they're neighbors right across the street from me.
Okay.
And then they were in the furniture business. So Nathan and Lauren Munton are almost 25-year veterans in the furniture sleep space.
Okay.
And because my wife was in the furniture space too, they had known each other for a long time, and they saw Jeannie and they said, "Hey, I got this interesting technology." Jeannie said, "Well, my husband used to do something like that." So we met over time, and after a couple of months, we thought there was really something there. And then, that was about 2.5 years ago. So we're off and running right now. So it's a ball.
So their background was furniture.
Yep.
Okay.
And they're not only furniture, but disruptive technologies inside the furniture. They've done some really interesting things with batteries. And what they're good at is creating technology to innovate and disrupt the marketplace.
Okay.
And then penetrate the market that way, which is really interesting. So we have an e-commerce website up and running now. So we're selling mattresses, bed bases, pillows, sheets, because what we're trying to do is build a customer base that's ready when we have the pillowcase that's interested in the science of sleep.
Okay.
And that's underway right now.
So I was reading that it's interesting technology called fabric as a service.
Fabric as a sensor, yeah.
As a sensor,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
FAAS.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm used to the software as a service.
That's right, yeah.
So can you break it down a little bit on how the
Sure.
data is collected and analyzed? And
For sure.
So
fabric as a sensor is really a solution, but it starts with the neurosensing fabrics. So, pillowcases, right? These aren't sensors sewn into a pillowcase, but the actual material of the pillowcase will be conductive, and that allows us to collect the minute brain waves, which are electrical stimuli. And by the way, we can capture every other stimuli in the body, like heart rate. So we'll be able to capture a lot of the basic biometric information as well. So on your pillowcase, we'll be able to collect it. But sleeping in a normal room, normal bedroom is very noisy. So what we have to do now is use some really interesting noise reduction technologies, so we can remove everything out of the noisy bedroom environment and focus just on the brain waves. So it's trying to find a chocolate chip in the middle of a huge chocolate chip cookie. And so the science and math is only now kind of got to the point where we can do that. So neurosensing materials have come a long way. Advanced material manufacturing and design have come a long way. We're in a really interesting spot now. But the science and math that allows us to do this really high-end neuro algorithm development is only kind of recently in place. And so we'll be able to collect it, curate it, protect it, and then the neurodata stack. So we collect your sleep for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months. Then we can use those neurodata stacks to look for those anomalies. And that's where we have neurotelemedicine capability. At the edge, we'll be able to go into wellness and performance. You'll be able to package that neurodata to provide it to a lot of interested parties.
So it sounds like it's both a hardware and a software.
It is. It is both. It's hardware, it's software, and then it's use of data.
Can you describe a little bit about your software stack? What's that look like?
Yeah, so software stacks is interesting. It starts at the ability to collect minute brainwave information. And again, that's the signal to noise kind of reduction, is to remove all the noise, do as much local collection as we can, because we will have to move this to the cloud at some point for high computation. But in the sleep model, I don't have to have near real-time data flow because you're asleep. Now, the brain will also signal to you when you start to wake up. There's about a 20, 25-minute package. So our data is collected, curated, and stored locally. Then it's moved to the cloud for computation. And then we're going to have a dashboard. So when you get up in the morning, you'll have a true sleep score, not biometric information. It'll be complemented with biometric, but it'll be your actual sleep stages. So when you get up in the morning, what's the first thing most of us do is we grab our phone and look, and then you'll be able to see that score. So that's the start to the stack. The algorithms that are in the cloud, we're looking at Amazon Web Services kind of cloud, and then Databricks from a cloud computing perspective, running Sparks against the actual metadata, because then we can categorize the data in unique kind of environments. So one of the things that'll be really helpful is looking at tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of men between the age of 40 and 55 that have leading indicators of dementia. So we can look backwards in the data stacks and then be predictive in the future. As we see those anomalies in somebody else coming, that could be a leading indicator where there's a problem. And so if you allow your information to be shared with a neurologist, then he can look for those disturbances and bring you in earlier rather than waiting for a physiological response or some outward appearance that, the brain has already signaled to you months, days, weeks in advance that something's going on.
Now, where are you at in the development stage? Are you a prototype or
we are a prototype. Actually, our first prototype is being tested at UNCW.
Okay.
So UNCW has developed kind of a two-pronged approach for the future. One is in kind of the marine cybersecurity. The other one is Brain Health Hub. And we're one of the Planck founding industry members in that kind of environment. So we're in the second semester of testing. We had a sample size of 15, so 15 college students last year slept on our pillow type. We collected their brainwaves. Now we're analyzing that against the gold standard electroencephalogram, or EEG. Those are the caps that you have kind of glued to your head, so that we can show folks that we're collecting a different brainwave, but we can do just the same gold standard kind of sleep analysis. We have another study going on this year for another 30 participants. So by the end of the semester, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we'll have about 45 folks collected. And then we also have a subset of that demographic is military. And so, this will have a dual use application for our war fighters. The DoD needs something to be a little more ruggedized, but that's why we're going to go direct to consumer with our first pillowcase and kind of software, and then drag the DoD through it right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah. The military
would
be a good area to partner with.
Absolutely. Yeah. As a guy who can't sleep, that's also the genesis, right? I have no problem falling asleep, but I just can't stay asleep. I don't know if it's 37 years of jumping on airplanes, concussive injuries, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, all the bad things we saw. I think it's a combination of it. But 2/3 of us in the warfighter and first responder space don't sleep very well. And sleep is so important. It's really critical to every system and function in your body. Short-term sleep deprivation is dangerous. Long-term and chronic sleep loss is deadly. And so that's what we're trying to do, is get ahead of it. And on the warfighter space, you want to make sure you have the right folks that are flying F-35s and dropping bombs close to you, as well rested as possible.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. I share that with you. I have problems sleeping as well.
You can be patient one. After that, I'll be patient zero. You can be patient
there
one.
There you go. Sign me up. So you're actively raising capital at this point?
We are. Yep. So we've bootstrapped this. We have a $2 million safe open right now.
Okay.
We have collected about $465,000 from angels and some high net worth folks.
Okay. Mostly local?
Nope, from all over the kind of country. We have some angel syndicates that are now interested in us. We actually had some really interesting interest from some folks out in the Midwest, but they typically make larger investments, and so we're looking at the right vehicle. Some folks consider it a simple agreement for future equity, a very left coast kind of Silicon Valley vehicle, and don't like to do it. More convertible notes out here, but we're looking for some really interesting kind of and there's one thing about money. There's also thing about smart money and partnerships and strategic investors. That's what we're looking for. Yeah. We've got a couple organizations like the Capital Factory that we're in due diligence with them out of Texas, and then some really interesting joint ventures as well to kind of partner with to expand our technology development.
Yeah. The safe approach, it's really popular these days because it's cheap, it's easy. A lot of people don't understand the legal cost of setting up corporate documents and trying to go out and do fundraising, because a lot of CEO and founders, instead of building their business, they're out, pitching for money.
Right.
And once they have the money, now they have to go build the business and then worry about raising more money if traction doesn't happen as quick as they thought.
Right.
What does that look like for you as far as traction, like use of proceeds?
Yeah, so you're right. And I had this conversation with the SBTDC at the CIE last week. I said, look, CEOs, you're always raising money. If you're not raising money from revenue, you're raising money from somewhere else. So don't ever stop. And whenever you think you have enough money, you don't. Whenever you don't need money is when you do need the money.
Exactly.
And so you've got it, right? That comes with scars and learning the lessons very, very quickly. But it is a combination. You have to demonstrate traction. You have to demonstrate efficacy. You have to demonstrate that there's a little thing called the customer is going to buy it at the end of it. And you're doing it all in a limited amount of time and money. And so that's where, experience comes in. There'll be times where you believe you're cash flush and technology poor, or the other way around. So it's meant to be a sine wave. And so the day of the entrepreneur is, it starts out, oh my goodness, we're all going to fail. 10 minutes later, maybe I have a new idea. 30 minutes later, right, you get an investor phone call. 40 minutes later, you're the best thing since sliced bread and you're the GOAT of all the startup companies. And then half hour later, right, you didn't get the deal. So that continues to play. So you have to be very thoughtful in terms of where you apply your money. It's all the flip side. You talked about the intellectual property. So you need to have the right lawyers, right?
Right.
And that's another lesson learned from young entrepreneurs is hire the right team up front. And then don't be afraid if the team that you've hired is not working out to your need, then you have to be willing to pivot very, very quickly too. It's not that you don't like people. It's just that the business acumen comes with having the right folks on your team. You got to get the right team.
Is culture important to you in running and operating a business?
100%. So we use culture as a lens before we look at partnership, whether it's potential investors, whether it's somebody in our C-suite team for sure, whether it's advisors, whether it's companies that we want to partner with. If we don't align nearly 100% in our culture and our goals and values, then it just probably won't work. And it probably won't work in the near term, but it certainly won't work in the long term. And every one of these partners, right, especially in the very beginning stages of a startup, are so vital and important, you can't really make a mistake. Because if you do make the mistake, it's costly longer term. You just don't have the hours and time to kind of sit there and try to massage something. But if you do it right up front, if you use the right lens up front in your due diligence, you have a much better outcome. At least I think so.
And how has the military affected your thoughts on leadership and culture?
The blocking and tackling of a military leader, which is being transparent, being forthright, being an expert in your chosen profession, is really, really critical in my mind. And we don't need to have 100 military folks on our team. And I need the folks on our team to understand that there is a little military flavor that's going to come through it. And if that's not the way to communicate or interact, then we'll find that hopefully in our due diligence process. Because the worst thing that we can get to is groupthink. But if you have, I hate to say this, if you have a civilian company or industry that's only led by military, you're going to have a very military-led outcome. Some cases that could be very positive if you're selling, intelligence back to the government or something like that, but not for a consumer kind of retail market space. You need to have that diversity of thought. And I think the military brings the structure that we talked about in the beginning, but it's not a mandatory must-have. On the other side, there are some venture capital companies that are focused on kind of venture-oriented businesses, and so we're talking to some of those as well. But if you look at those, the successful venture funds, they invest in veterans, but not only in veterans. You need to diversify your portfolio. Much like a veteran-owned business needs to look at those particular venture funds, but also throughout the entire kind of ecosystem as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Culture is important.
Culture is very important.
Culture eats strategy all day long.
100%. So what does the future look like for you? It seems like you've got your hands busy with family and post-semi-retirement, looking things to do here in the local community in Wilmington, and obviously running the bakery, running the wine shop, future expansion plans there, and also with the launching of Nuream and all of its challenges.
Yeah. So again, there are no 2 days alike, which is so much fun. And as long as I'm still having fun in all of them, we'll do that. But I've been very, very fortunate to build teams, at the bakery and at the wine sampler that allow them to operate. And again, I come in as the taste and quality control guy when we need to, which is fun. But it is important to maintain the culture, and only the leaders kind of do that. So that's why being in the business enough, and depending on what enough is for a day, may be different on today than it is kind of next Monday. But you have to be able to be fluid enough. But then it's about passion. The small businesses that we own right now are connected to the families, and then not only to our family, but to the family we call Wilmington. So we want to continue to give back that way. And so these businesses will stay around for a long time. And then Nuream is fun. Nuream is really the nexus of 30, 40 years of kind of science, education, background, personal issues. I can't sleep. And so as I deal with a lot of veteran support organizations, I sit on a lot of boards as well to kind of help them. We all kind of struggle and laugh at how poorly we sleep. And while we laugh about our struggles, it's really important because we're not getting any better. And so this is something this is something that's going to make a big difference to a lot of different communities. And we talked about some of the other verticals out there. So much so that Nuream started a 501c3, a not-for-profit, to use our neurodata on the mental health and mental well-being space, because it's that important. It's that endemic in our society where every one of our families have seen mental health of some sort, all the way through suicide. And in the military, the average that people like to say is 22 suicides a day in the military. That's tragic, but the number's a lot more than that, right? If you look at truly the numbers in the military and our veteran population, it's more like 40 or 50 a day. If you do the math, that's pretty bad. And a lot of it kind of drives down to loss of the tribe, loss of connection. And then our tools aren't good enough to help us identify these problems earlier. I was the chief of staff of the Army Reserve Command. So Army Reserve Command is 200,000 people, civilians and military. And one of my unfortunate jobs was to do an investigation on every suicide. And we were looking backwards and trying to find the indicators or the signs. We never saw this. We missed it. And the Army Reserve is different than the active duty. The active duty on Fort Bragg comes together a couple of times a day for formations. In the Army Reserve, I had a unit in New York City, and I had soldiers from 32 states that would fly in for a weekend. It's hard to see what's going on a day-to-day basis when your platoon sergeant is in Peoria and your platoon leader's in Florida, but you still have to figure out how to do it. So if we can do some things to connect ourselves virtually and digitally, that's what we have to do. But certainly, the suicide issue is one of the foundations is sleep. Stress in the financial space, stress in relationship, stress in transition, just moving to somewhere that's different, and then not being able to sleep, either from PTSD or something else. You put all that together, now you have unfortunately, the conditions for a bad outcome. Suicidal ideations and then suicides. That's terrible. It impacts so many people. And it's really, at that point, the mind has not been able to operate in logic correctly. It's in a different spot. And so we can do some things to help get in front of that, which we absolutely will, then 100% on the list.
Do you feel, I know this is off topic, but do you feel some of those systemic issues and outcomes that are tragic in the military, is that feeding in some of the issues on recruiting? Because I've been reading that there's recruiting problems.
Yeah, so the answer is yeah. So, our issues with recruiting are multifaceted. I mentioned earlier, 70% of our new recruits come from a military family. So if you look at the math, that necks up pretty quickly. And we recruit from certain zip codes in the country. So it used to be a great way to change a course of life because the military would give you some opportunities. Now most of the folks are joining for the opportunity to go to college, which is great, right? If you serve 1 day, 1 hour, 1 year, you're a brother or sister of mine, and I appreciate that. But right now we're very concerned about what happens post-service. And whether it's the VA, whether it's access to retirements, which are now different than it used to be. All these things add uncertainty to parents and to young men and women who are thinking about joining the military. This is a different society. They look peer-to-peer for kind of support group versus kind of mentors and kind of heroes kind of thing. And we in the military have to do a better job of providing the right structure for them. And we have seen too much suicide in our ranks. And it's not just suicide; it's mental health of all kinds. Right? The military is meant to be a perfect slice of humanity and of our society. And it comes with all great and good and bad. But our job is to make sure we get the best out of everybody. We do the best we can for everybody, and they do the best for the military. But there is that mental health side there, and we've asked some folks in the last couple of years in this global war on terror to do some really horrific things, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. We also owe them the opportunity for us to help them identify the problems and get some help where they need it.
Well, hopefully your technology will help make some strides in
absolutely.
that area.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
Yeah.
So is the military. So is the VA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yep.
Well, thank you again. This has been very good. I really appreciate your time, and I've enjoyed talking to you and learning more about the businesses and your future plans.
Same here. Thank you again. And thank you for what you do. I think, you're doing a great, I'd say, thing for this environment. It's really amazing when folks of your kind of experience, talent, and background come down here and do something like this. So thank you for what you do every day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Amplified CEO is produced by Topsail Insider, edited by Jim Mendes-Pouget, and sponsored by Cape Fear Ventures. For more information about Amplified CEO, Richard Stroupe, or Cape Fear Ventures, please contact Christa at 910-800-0111 or Christa at topsailinsider.com.